Join me now to weigh in, representing Texas's 4th Congressional District, Congressman Pat Fallon. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. Congressman, it's been a pretty heavy news week when it comes to learning about the origins of the pandemic, Dr. Fauci's emails. What stood out to you the most? Obviously, Dr. Fauci was telling the American people one thing. Meantime, behind the scenes in his emails, he had a little bit of a different narrative and a different story.
Well, the elitists tend to do that, Stephanie, and thanks for having me on. Was it science or was it science fiction? He clearly exaggerated, at least publicly, the importance of masks, and then to be very dismissive about a year ago about the lab leak theory when it was always the most plausible. I think Americans knew that. Anybody with common sense knew. You have hundreds of Chinese cities, and this virus originated in Wuhan. And where do they do this virology? And where do they do this research on biological testing and weapons? In Wuhan. That's just not a coincidence. And they knew so much more than they let on. And I really think that there's blood of millions of people on the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
And I guess maybe some of the things we learned in the email wasn't really a surprise. It kind of just confirmed what we already knew, because we saw his evolving, shifting positions on many of the important issues on interviews and videotapes that we played on the show many times. That being said, one of the big things that stood out to me was his denial of the gain of function research. And if you remember the back and forth between him and Senator Rand Paul, he was denying that the possibility of any taxpayer dollars going to that research, very dangerous research, and he just played totally dumb about it when he had been emailing about it. So are you concerned?
I'm very concerned because, you know, we get a lot of classified briefings now, particularly when I'm as I serve on the Armed Services Committee. And China poses a clear and present danger to the United States and the free world, for that matter. And for us to sit there and underwrite anything that they're doing is madness. We have an incredibly huge trade imbalance with them. They're taking full advantage. And the only president to ever stand up to them was President Trump. We need more of that and far more of this, far less of this appeasement.
Yeah. Do you think that Fauci should be, there should be some sort of criminal investigation into this? There have been calls for that.
Why not? I mean, I absolutely, just to find out the truth. Not to say we want to find out our truth or their truth, but simply the truth. So I'm not worried about that at all. And also, if we can just talk about this COVID-19, there is no expert on COVID-19. The virus is too young. It hasn't been a year and a half yet. We'll have experts when the data set comes out that's 3, 4, and 5 years out. And then we'll have and really be able to know and see a clearer picture of what this virus has done and the best way to handle it moving forward. Thank God for warp speed and the vaccine.
Yeah. Some of the other emails that stood out to me was the amount of times that he had back and forths with Bill Gates, the conversations that he had with Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. And a lot of that was redacted. I don't know why.
Well, you know, clearly he was playing for a certain team. He wasn't playing for the American people. The people that he was talking to were the leftist elites, and that's why they put him on a pedestal, and they praised him. And, you know, anything Dr. Fauci said goes. This is an unelected bureaucrat. This is madness. We don't do what unelected bureaucrats tell us, you know, and not even question it. The good Lord bless all of us with trillions of brain cells between our ears, and we can take advice that is sound, but we're going to take and look at science, and again, not science fiction.
Yeah, and he had a lot of conversations with experts and other experts, and it seems like he only would pick and choose the information he would listen to. There's one expert who had emailed him and suggested, hey, like, we only need to have those who are elderly and immunocompromised. Those are the people that need to stay home and self-quarantine. The regular rest of the healthy folks, they can go out and kind of live their normal lives. And he didn't consider that. I mean, we didn't stop and consider this almost year of lockdowns, considering that there were other experts who said that wasn't really necessary.
You know, Stephanie, he was an unknown, unnamed bureaucrat for his entire career, and then he was thrust into a spotlight and became one of the most famous people on earth. And it clearly went to his head. And it's almost as if he was rooting for the virus. I mean, this is something that the people on the left were more than happy to hunker down in their basements for a couple of years, which would have destroyed the country. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. And in that case, that's what they were advocating for. Again, it was nuts.
And then you think back of all these months, and I've been obviously reporting and covering on the pandemic and talking to experts. I feel like everyone I've talked to has gotten it right for the most part. And those who've gotten it wrong, they won't apologize. They double and triple down. They're totally shameless in this. And then I remember all the names that we were called. Conspiracy theorists because we questioned whether or not the pandemic, the COVID-19 origins came from bat soup. We were criticized for calling it the China virus, which it is the China virus. We're accused of being racist for that, by the way. But those who think that that accusing those who eat bat soup of the COVID-19 virus, like they think that's not racist. So I think all those people who criticized us so harshly, they owe us an apology. I'm waiting for it. Do you think we'll get one?
Yeah, we are COVID deniers.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, just searching for the truth. I mean, that's what it amounted to. And to say that, you know, because let's be really honest about what this is about. This is about criticizing President Trump and trying to blame him for things he had nothing to do with. Our leftist press would literally, they took the side of the Chinese Communist government, some of the most evil folks on the planet in Beijing, and not their own president. They wouldn't question them, and then they tried to make it a racial issue when he would call it the China virus, when these kind of viruses oftentimes are known for their origin. You can go down a list. Lyme disease is because it's from Lyme, Connecticut. Rocky Mountain fever, MERS, the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. It has nothing to do with race at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. And the Democrats use the whole race thing, the race card, as a dishonest talking point because they just want to shut down a conversation. They have nothing there, so they always jump to race. Literally, they do it every single time. I want to shift gears and ask you about the debate going on in Texas over the new voting bill, and the Democrats are losing their mind. I mean, this isn't just a Texas thing because we know the Democrats seem to attack any sort of effort to secure our ballot boxes, and they try to make it seem like they're like Jim Crow laws or it's racist. And again, they use the racism thing for everything. So recently was Democrats had walked out over voting on the legislation. So the governor, he's cracking down on them. I mean, there's been a lot of controversy in Texas over the new voting bill.
Yeah, I served in the Texas House for 6 years, and I know most of the players, and they ran away. So let's just, so the viewers, particularly the ones not in Texas, know what happened. It was the last couple of days of the legislative session, and it was Senate Bill 7, and all it did was just firm up some voting laws. And really what it made it do is made it harder to cheat, not harder to vote. Then, for instance, in Harris County, where Houston is, they had instituted 24-hour voting. The heck does anybody need to vote at 4 in the morning for? So what this bill did was just tighten up the hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., no drive-through voting. And if you wanted to vote by mail, guess what? You just simply had to prove who you were. And it's the soft bigotry of low expectations from the left. It's really something else that they said, for instance, they were very angry about the fact that voting on Sundays would begin at 1 p.m. And they said, well, you know, we've got these souls to the polls. These lots of black churches traditionally have had people vote immediately after church, and it should be at 11 a.m. Well, first of all, 1 a.m. is very reasonable, and you're telling me that any African-American in Texas can only vote on Sunday? That's ridiculous. We have 2 weeks of early voting in Texas, and then we have Election Day voting. This doesn't target any particular group or demographic or region. It's very fair-minded, and quite frankly, it's reasonable and commonsensical. And they ran away. The Democrats ran away, so you need a quorum. You have 150 reps in Texas. And you need 100 to be there present to consider any legislation. There's 83 Republicans and 77 Democrats, and almost every Democrat ran away, although many promised they wouldn't do it, and that's what they did. I
think, you know, who wants to vote at 4 a.m., maybe like dead people, because some dead people like to vote, right?
They come out of the grave. You know, it's easier to cheat. I had a friend of mine who I served with who then became my general counsel. He lost in 2018, a state rep named Mike Schofield by 99 votes, and then he did win his seat back in 2020. But there were a lot of fishy things going on in his election, and because they thought it would be that tight. Fortunately, he won by 2,000 votes. That's why the Democrats don't want these bills, is because it does make it harder to cheat.
Really quickly, I want to ask you about this. I saw you tweeted about it. So Amazon is allowing for the sale of T-shirts and other items that say Blue Lives Murder. That's pretty terrible. And I mean, there is some outrage, but so is Amazon going to continue to allow the sales of these T-shirts?
Boy, I hope not. I mean, they're a company. They have the right to do that. Just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean you should. When you demonize our law enforcement, you demoralize our law enforcement. And you're not going to get better policing when it's more difficult to attract people to the profession and retain people that are already there. it's going to be self-defeating. And that's a lot of what liberals do, is their actual policies hurt the very people they're intended to help. Who in law enforcement helps who the most by statistics? People of color. And they're going to be hurting the left, and sales of these kinds of shirts are going to end up disproportionately hurting people of color. It's ridiculous. It's abhorrent. And I would definitely call for Amazon, as we have, and I will continue to not allow the sale of these shirts. It's just unbecoming.
I'm wondering if you removed the blue part and just put anything else that kind of goes against the Democratic narrative or whatever, if they would allow for that. Do you think they would? I haven't looked into it.
No, and then Stephanie, we'd end up in Facebook jail. It's just, they're perfectly fine with, being visceral as long as it's coming from the left. If any kind of visceral political debate comes from the right, they shut it down. Or quite frankly, anything from the right that they very much vehemently disagree with. Like, I don't know, the lab leak theory. Boy, that got shut down really quickly for a year on Facebook, and now they're allowing it because they know it's most likely the truth.
Well, like I said, that Facebook email with Zuckerberg and Fauci, most of it was redacted, but you have to wonder what the conversation was about. And if you remember, and I know you do, what's a lot of the facts that we now know were censored before because they were considered disinformation because the fact checker said so. But actually it wasn't. So it's interesting that we have these social media companies working with government officials on censoring information that may have been useful to us.
Yeah, beware of the Silicon Valley oligarchs.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. Anyways, we're totally out of time. We appreciate your insight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. God bless. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.